Welcome, everyone. We're very glad that you could join us today. So as Anna already said, my name is Andreas and I'm part of the ELSI workstream of GHGA, where we are exploring the ethical and legal and social implications of genomic data sharing. And we are very excited to have with us today an expert in ELSI questions, Professor Ruth Horn. Ruth has a PhD in sociology of ethics and has been a Marie Curie Fellow at the Center for Ethics in Medicine at the University of Bristol. In 2013, she joined the Ethox Center of the University of Oxford, where since 2020, she also holds a position as Associate Professor in Ethics. And since 2021, Ruth is also a senior lecturer and the deputy head of the chair Ethics and Medicine at the University of Augsburg. She is also a member of the scientific advisory board of GHGA, so has a direct connection to us. And today she will be talking about ethical implications of public-private partnerships in the context of genomic big data. So Ruth, we are very excited that you could join us today, and we're looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas and Anna, for the introduction, and thanks very much for inviting me to speak at the GHGA lecture series. So I'm trying to share my screen now. I think you the first, Anna, maybe you first need to stop sharing your screen. Because I can't share my screen as long as the slide here is up.
I know. Wait a minute. I'm having a small issue. Okay, now it works. Sorry.
Okay, can you see my full screen presentation mode now?
Yes.
Good. All right, so thank you very much. And so the title of my talk today is Ethical Implications of Public-Private Partnerships in the Context of Big Health Data. It is based on a paper I have been writing together with a colleague in France, Jennifer Merchant, and the UK France Plus Gene Consortium. And I will say a few words more about this consortium in a bit. The paper is currently under review with the European Journal of Human Genetics. So the UK France Plus Genomics and Ethics Network is a platform for academics, policymakers, and clinicians with an interest in ethical questions arising from the implementation of large genome initiatives. We started with 2 countries in UK and France, and since 2021, we also invited Germany into the network, and last year we invited Israel, and we are continuously broadening our scope and inviting further countries to join the network. The idea started in 2018 when the French and the British governments announced their plan to strengthen their cooperation in advancing genomic medicine and its implementation into clinical practice. And in particular, the cooperation between their 2 large-scale genomic initiatives, Genomics England and the Plan France Médecine Génomique 25. At that time, there was much focus on the scientific and technical aspects of how this cooperation could work, how these 2 big initiatives can cooperate together. And so I thought there is still room and scope for a group of interested people to look into the ethical issues arising from these initiatives and from the implementation of genomic medicine. So together with a colleague, Marie Guy, and from France, at this time, we started this network in 2018. And since 2020, Jennifer Merchant, a colleague from France, took over from Marie. The idea is that we organize once a year a workshop and on a topic we think is of particular interest at that time with regard to the 2 initiatives and the current developments of genomic medicine. Our last workshop was in 2023, and the title was Ethical Implications of Private-Public Partnerships in Genomics, and the paper I'm presenting is based on the discussions from this workshop. If you would like to know more about our network, you can check out the Ethox website, where there's a page for the UK-France Gene Network. And I would also like to use this opportunity to thank the various institutions and organizations who supported us financially to organize these workshop series. The paper was co-authored with a group, the consortium members from the UK, from France, from Germany, Israel, and one colleague from Austria. Today, I'm going to first show how public-private partnerships impact on public trust and challenge the social contract. I would then like to discuss how the 4 countries we studied, the UK, France, Germany, and Israel, respond to these challenges. I will then explore 3 approaches that have been discussed and presented at the workshop to address the challenges of private-public partnerships in the use of secondary data. And I will conclude by making some suggestions for a minimum set of requirements for these partnerships within solidarity-based public-funded healthcare systems. So first of all, what do we mean by public-private partnerships? We mean partnerships where public institutions give access to their data to private entities, and the data held by the public institutions have been collected within the public health system and are managed by the public institutions. So we call it like public data. And when private entities like commercial companies enter the scene and ask for access to this data. In our workshop, we clearly acknowledge that it is very important to have these partnerships because this allows us to maximize the benefit of health data and to really fully harvest the potential of health data. When we get in also private entities, they often have maybe even more resources than public institutions to develop innovative treatments, public health surveillance, and personalized healthcare. However, we notice that there are some issues with regard to public trust and when these partnerships happen. With public trust, we mean the citizens' reasonable belief in the commitment of public institutions to serve and promote the interests of the public. So everything I'm presenting today is within this sphere of publicly funded healthcare systems like a welfare state. What we notice, however, in surveys and big national polls is that citizens usually start distrusting or they are becoming suspicious with regard to who their data is shared with as soon as profit-oriented companies enter the scene, because they don't want their data, they don't seem to their data to want to be shared with and leave the public health systems, the public institutions, and they don't really trust the intentions of the profit-oriented companies. We see in these polls that, and in the big surveys, that the level of trust and of course also the distrust is higher in countries with a well-funded public health care system that promotes public benefit, as is the case, for example, in the UK, France, and Germany, where we have very high expectations of citizens towards the state. And these are higher than in less robust welfare states, still welfare states, but maybe with a less strong framework, such as we have in the US or in Israel. The concern is that profit-oriented partners might not return benefits to the public sector, so that they take out data that has been given by the public and is curated in the public sector, and the private sector makes money with it, but nothing will be returned to the public. Now, with increasing interest in turning health data into a wealth asset, this challenges the social contract between a solidarity-based welfare state and its citizens, because this contract has originally been set up to act in the interest of the public. So by, for example, taxation citizens contribute to the public system, they pay according to their means, and they can get and benefit from the services offered by public institutions according to their needs. So this is based on a circular solidarity principle. And when we have public or private institutions now coming in and this profit-oriented companies, this kind of disrupts the social contract. Now, with regard to the 4 countries we studied, we have 4 publicly funded healthcare systems that have already established, or they are about to establish national genomic and other health data initiatives to collect, share, and manage data. We have in the UK, we have Genomics England, with and possibly Genomics England, or the UK is definitely one of the global leaders, with more than 500,000 genomes sequenced and going to be continued. The results of Genomics England have since, and the knowledge acquired from Genomics England has since been transitioning since 2021 into the clinic by the NHS Genomic Services, now providing genome sequences as part of routine clinical care. In France, we have another big national initiative, which I mentioned already earlier, the Plan France Médecine Génomique 2025, with an also very ambitious program to sequence a large number of genomes per year between 2020 and 2025. And of course, they aim to implement and introduce this into the clinical services. In Germany, as many of, or some of you may know, we have a very different situation because the genomic data or health data generally is not available in one big hub or in one big initiative, but we have scattered data across the country in various institutions, academic institutions, university hospitals, etc. But it is difficult for this data to be, until recently, it hasn't been possible to put it all in one national repository. However, as you may know, these things are underway, for example, through the GHGA initiative, which is aiming to bring together the data collected, the genomic data collected through research projects. We have a similar initiative with Genome-DE that is trying to get together the genomic data coming from the clinical side, and all this is pushed and motivated a lot, for example, by the initiative of the German Medical Informatics Initiative and a variety of different laws. So things are changing now in Germany, and there's a big effort to catch up with the development in other countries. In Israel, we have a large national DNA biobank that represents the ethnic diversity of the Jewish and Arab population in Israel. So now the question that came up in our workshop and we wanted to address is, how do these countries address the questions of the ethical questions of data use and the procedural questions of data use and access within their respective social contracts? So Genomics England has set up a national genomic research library, which means that data can be viewed or read, but it cannot be taken out. And access to the service is given if researchers can show that their research contributes to the public benefit. There's a standard contract set up already with academic institutions and public institutions, and private entities can also benefit from this data access, but they have to apply individually for these services. However, we noticed that there are some difficulties with the setup. For example, it is difficult and unclear how, in particularly in early stage research, public benefit is going to be defined, and if this is a requirement to gain access to the data or to view the data, there's a risk of over-promising the benefits if the companies want to gain this access. It has also been raised that it is difficult to monitor the generation of public benefit, and it is difficult and it is expensive, which again raises another set of questions with regard to how we use our scarce resources. In France, similar to the Genomic Research Library in England, we have a model of remote access where data can be viewed but not taken out. The genomic data in France is all collected in the French Health Data Hub, and access is given to the data sets if researchers can show that there's a contribution to, as they frame it in France, to the public interest, or in other words, public good. Again, it is unclear, however, how public interest or the public good can be defined or should be defined. Another issue in France is that the data stored in the French Health Data Hub is stored on Microsoft's Azure cloud, and this not in the UK, not in France or in Europe, but it is stored in the US. So this raises, of course, huge concerns and questions around GDPR compliance and data safety, and also questions around financial interests of the big company Microsoft. In Germany, we have a model where there is, I mentioned already, we have scattered data across the country, and access to these various data sets is difficult to organize, difficult. There's no clear national regulation, because every federal state also has their own laws and policies. However, a secure data environment for secondary data use is under development, as mentioned earlier. Currently in Germany, there's no possibility to give access to private companies of the publicly held data. And we have a context where we have a very strict governance and protection of privacy and confidentiality in Germany, which certainly refers also to Germany's history of having had two totalitarian states in the past that did not respect people's and individuals' privacy rights. So in these three countries, we also see that there are high expectations of citizens towards the state, and citizens expect the state to protect their interests. And we see that usually in the polls, we see that the willingness to donate data decreases when these expectations are not met. So for example, when there were a few incidents in England when private companies came in and gained access to publicly held data without the public being well informed about this. And in each incident, the public then withdrew their data. They didn't give access to the data anymore. So there are similar cases in the other countries. Now in Israel, we have a different situation. First of all, data sharing is also possibly only for research purposes. This applies to public and private entities trying to gain access to the data. And there's a separate committee overseeing the international data sharing. In Israel, we have no specific requirements regarding public benefits or the data access for private companies. And the situation in Israel, there was a study in Israel that has shown that the citizens have sort of a fatalistic attitude, saying that anyways, there's no control over data in the digital age. So they don't really trust that their data is protected, and they don't necessarily trust their state because it is seen as unreliable and inefficient. They also say that private companies are unfair, but at least professional. However, they still donate their data because they hope to achieve some good with the use of their data. So we have sort of a different expectation towards the state at a lower rate than in the other countries. Now we see that each country faces its own challenges regarding public-private partnerships. And in our workshop, we then asked the question whether it is possible to conceive of a general approach or model that could address all these specific concerns. And we discussed three different models. The first model is the so-called solidarity-grounded approach to public-private partnerships. This is based on a paper I wrote with my colleague Angeliki Kerasido. And we start from the promise that profit-oriented interests in public-private partnerships challenge public trust and solidarity-based welfare states, similar to what I mentioned earlier. we say that solidarity means, or we start from the definition that solidarity means the feeling of mutual responsibility, togetherness, and commitment to the common good. And with this definition, solidarity is the foundational principle of public institutions, like public healthcare systems. And it is also the basis for citizens' trust in states' commitment to public benefit. Now, if we want public-private partnerships to maintain the public trust, we say that trustworthy partnerships should aim to integrate the norms of solidarity and public benefit, meaning that they put public's expectations and concerns center stage. And this would require, for example, that public healthcare systems are given preferential access to the goods and services that are developed using their data, that access to data should only be given where the research serves the public's interests. There should be transparency about possible conflicts of interests, and if there are conflicts, then show how they are going to be addressed. And we also say that there should be a monitored data visiting, reading model of access so that the data can all stay within the public sphere and not leave the original data environment. So while this approach focuses on the nature of these partnerships, we had a second approach, the so-called data solidarity approach, that proposes a data governance framework. This is to warrant and evaluate the fair distribution of benefits and risks of data use. This approach was presented by Barbara Preinsack and based on a paper she wrote with colleagues. The requirements of this approach are that there should be different regulations in place depending on the type of data use, so whether the data use generates more or less public benefit, and whether there's more or less harm or benefit involved or risks involved. Furthermore, they require that we need to define a threshold of acceptable risk of data use, and this should then also be enforced. Then where data use increases the public trust, this research should be supported and subsidized. When private companies make commercial profit, then this profit should somehow be returned to the public domain fairly, meaning to those needed. And this could be through corporate taxation, taxing the commercial companies accordingly to the profit they make using the publicly held data, or there could be any other benefit sharing measures nationally or with specific communities. Another requirement is that data should be seen and treated as collective property that is governed democratically, and that illicit or unethical data use should be sanctioned or prohibited altogether, depending on the level of risk. And any harm that might be caused to individuals by the use of the data should be supported and compensated by the private company. Then we had a third approach, presented the rights-based approach, which was presented by Eva Winkler and colleagues. And this approach actually states or starts from the idea that we should take into account all relevant stakeholders' rights and duties. And by all relevant stakeholders, they mean patient and data subjects, the public, physicians and public healthcare institutions, as well as the interests and rights, the rights and duties of private companies. So we might have sometimes a clash of interests when we talk, for example, about the rights, right to privacy, right to information and self-determination versus the right to freedom of research. Or we might have a clash with regard to the duties, a duty to participate in research versus the duty to respect transparency or accountability. So we have duties from both sides, from the public and the private sector. In order to mitigate possible tensions, this approach considers that we need concrete, again, we have a set of requirements for private companies who use public data. First of all, they say that private companies should show that they strive to improve health or healthcare research by their research using the data. They should prove that there is contribution and what contribution to the patients are expected, and that their contributions according to the patient's needs and the public healthcare system. Then there should be respect of the principles of accountability and transparency. The private companies should have a fair pricing system so that the innovations they develop are affordable for the public healthcare system, affordable and accessible. And private companies should register their research protocols in order to show their accountability for data security, patients' privacy, and risk minimization. And finally, they should have an obligation also to involve patients and participants in the process. Now, in our discussions at the workshop, we acknowledge that there is much room for interpretation and implementation of these requirements. However, we saw that there is some common sense, for example, and particularly with regard to the use of public data by private companies and the necessity to return any benefits to the public. And this is based on the idea of the social contract in citizens and the solidarity-based institutions. So private institutions shouldn't come in just and take out data without returning back the benefits to the people who gave the data, donated the data. The benefits should also be returned to all groups, we agreed, of society and according to their needs. And this means that we have to keep a particular eye on possible marginalized groups, and they might also require particular protection and robust safeguard of their data. And finally, we acknowledge that although we rely on solidarity as a framework for this doesn't mean that we should use or misuse the principle of solidarity in order to claim an obligation on all to donate data. Because if ever there should be such an obligation, we first need to establish that benefits are definitely returned to everyone according to their needs and to all groups within societies. So in conclusion, we try to define or present a model that kind of brings together the three approaches we discussed and presented in the workshop, and we came up with several conditions that should apply to private-public partnerships. The first one is that there should be contribution to the public benefit in the realm of healthcare. Then we say that there should be different regulations depending on the benefits or harms of the data use. So research that has more benefit should be facilitated and supported, whereas research that involves some potential harm should be scrutinized more than the other research. We also say there should be a prohibition of any data use that poses clear risks to individuals or communities. We further state that there should be sufficient oversight with regard to what are the harms and what are the benefits, and that clearly the benefits should outweigh any commercial interests. We then say that there is need to build a robust and trustworthy governance framework to guarantee that the benefits are returned to the public and protect the donors and especially marginalized groups. And we require that public partnerships and public-private partnerships are transparent about possible conflicts of interest and commercial interests and how these benefits will be returned to the public. And finally, we say that we should avoid any misuse of the principle of solidarity. We, of course, acknowledge that there is still much room for interpretation of how to concretely implement these conditions. However, we hope that this gives some food thought or something maybe to start for policymakers who want to put this into concrete measures in their respective countries. So we hope that these requirements are the first step in establishing sustainable public trust. Thank you very much.